Picture two people, same age, same job, same salary. One of them wakes up on Monday morning and immediately checks their bank account. Not because they want to, because they have to. They need to know if the rent cleared, if the card will go through at lunch, if they can afford to fill the tank without doing math in their head first. The other one wakes up, makes coffee, doesn't check the app. Not because they're rich, not because they're careless, but because somewhere in the back of their brain there's a quiet voice that says, "You're fine." Same job, same salary, completely different life. The only thing that's different between these two people is a number. And that number isn't $1 million. It isn't six figures. It isn't even close to what most financial gurus tell you to chase. It's $10,000. And today, I'm going to show you exactly what happens to your brain, your career, your decisions, and your entire relationship with money the moment you cross that line. Because nobody tells you what actually shifts. They just tell you to save. They never explain why this specific number is the one that changes everything. My name is Rehan, and I spent way too much time studying why some people quietly escape financial stress while everyone around them stays stuck. Same income, completely different outcomes. If you want to understand the real mechanics behind building wealth instead of just hoping things improve someday, subscribe and stay with me, because today we're going deep. Here's exactly what we're covering today. First, there's a psychological shift that happens at $10,000 that nobody in finance talks about, and it's more powerful than any investment return. We'll get into that. Second, there's a specific way $10,000 changes your relationship with your job, not your portfolio, that could be worth more than the $10,000 itself. I'll show you the numbers on that. Third, I'm going to walk you through what the second $10,000 costs you in time compared to the first. The answer is going to feel almost unfair. And finally, I'm going to tell you the single biggest mistake people make the moment they hit this milestone. It's more common than you think, and it quietly destroys everything they built. Let's go. Before we go anywhere, I need to address the thing you're probably already thinking. $10,000 isn't a lot of money. In most major cities around the world, that's 3, maybe 4 months of basic living expenses. It won't buy you a house, it won't fund your retirement, it won't make you wealthy overnight. So why does it change everything? Because $10,000 was never supposed to make you rich, it was supposed to do something much more important. It was supposed to move you out of one category of person and into a completely different one. Here's what I mean. There is a landmark study from the Financial Health Network that found something that completely reframes how we think about savings. The single biggest predictor of long-term financial success isn't income. It isn't education level, it isn't the country you live in or the family you were born into. It's whether or not a person has a financial buffer, even a small one. Because without a buffer, your brain operates in what psychologists call scarcity mode. Every financial decision gets filtered through fear. Every unexpected bill feels like a disaster. Every opportunity gets evaluated through the lens of what if something goes wrong first. And here's the part that makes this genuinely tragic. When your brain is in scarcity mode, it physically cannot think long term. Princeton researchers Sendhil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir spent years studying this. They found that financial stress consumes the equivalent of 13 IQ points of cognitive bandwidth. 13 IQ points. That's the same mental load as pulling an all-nighter every single day. People aren't making bad financial decisions because they're bad with money. They're making bad decisions because their brain is running a constant background process. Fear, calculation, contingency planning before they even sit down for breakfast. $10,000 is the number that shuts that process off. Not permanently, not magically, but enough. Enough to breathe. Enough to think forward instead of just sideways. Let me introduce you to Maya. Maya makes $42,000 a year. She lives in a mid-sized city, decent apartment, reliable enough car, a job she doesn't love but doesn't hate. From the outside, she looks completely fine. But until 8 months ago, Maya had $400 in her savings account. And here's what that actually felt like from the inside. Every time her boss said something unreasonable, Maya smiled and nodded because she couldn't afford to say what she actually thought. Every time a better job posting showed up on LinkedIn, she didn't apply because the idea of 2 weeks without a paycheck felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Every time her car made a strange noise, she turned the radio up louder because she genuinely could not afford to find out what it was. Maya wasn't in a bad life, she was in a financial cage, and the bars were completely invisible. Nobody could see them. Not her coworkers, not her friends, not her family, maybe not even Maya herself until she looked back later. Then Maya saved $10,000. Not by getting promoted, not by launching a side hustle that went viral, not by winning anything or inheriting anything or getting lucky with anything. Just by cutting one subscription she forgot she had, automating a $400 transfer to savings every month, and waiting. 14 months later, she had $10,000. And here's what changed. Her car made that noise again. She took it to the mechanic. The bill was $800. She handed over the card. No panic spiral, no mental math, no lying awake at 2 a.m. calculating whether she could cover it before the next paycheck. The money was there, the problem was solved. She drove home and made dinner. That was it. That was the whole story. But here's why that moment matters more than it sounds. That same $800 repair a year ago would have hijacked her entire mental operating system for a week. The dread of finding out what it was. The scramble to move money between accounts. The recovery period afterward. The conversation with herself about whether she was just bad at this. Now it's just a Tuesday afternoon. When Harvard researchers studied the psychological impact of emergency savings, they found that people with just 3 months of expenses saved reported a 27% higher sense of life satisfaction. Not because their incomes increased, not because their circumstances improved dramatically, but because the background noise of financial fear had finally, for the first time, gone quiet. $10,000 is the number that turns down the volume on that noise. And once it goes quiet, something remarkable happens. Your brain, freed from running constant financial threat assessments, finally has the bandwidth to start asking a completely different question. Not, how do I survive this month, but how do I build something that lasts? That question is worth more than any interest rate. Okay, let's talk about what $10,000 actually does mathematically, because this is where most people dramatically underestimate what they've built. Say you invest your $10,000 in a basic S&P 500 index fund. Historical average annual return, roughly 10%. Some years more, some years significantly less. But over a long time horizon, the data consistently lands around 10%. Year 1, your $10,000 earns $1,000, just sitting there. You didn't clock in for it. You didn't negotiate for it. You didn't drive anywhere to earn it. It just appeared because your money was working while you weren't. $1,000 sounds small. That's fine. Stay with me. Because in year 2, you're not earning 10% on $10,000 anymore. You're earning 10% on $11,000, then $12,100, then $13,310, then $14,641. This is compound interest, and the reason nobody gives it the respect it deserves is because it's completely invisible in the early years. It feels like nothing is happening. The numbers change slowly, you check the app, you shrug, you move on. But here is what's actually happening beneath the surface. After 10 years, no new contributions, no extra effort, no watching the market obsessively, your $10,000 becomes $25,937. After 20 years, $67,275. After 30 years, $174,494. After 40 years, if you started at 25, this is your retirement, $452,593. You put in $10,000, you did nothing, and time silently handed you $442,000 in profit. Now here's where this math permanently changes how you think about major purchases. That $30,000 car, the one with the monthly payment that feels manageable, $550 a month, barely noticeable, everyone does it. In a parallel universe where you invested that $30,000 instead and left it alone for 30 years, it becomes $523,500. You didn't just buy a car. You traded over $500,000 for something that lost 20% of its value the moment you drove it off the lot, something that will be close to zero in 15 years. The same math applies to the luxury apartment upgrade, the expensive wedding, the business class flight, the watch. Every dollar has a future version of itself. Wealthy people see the future version. Everyone else sees the price tag. And the moment you have $10,000 invested, the moment you watch it earn money you didn't work for, your brain starts making that calculation automatically. Not in an obsessive way, not in a way that sucks the joy out of everything, just in a way that makes you quietly, consistently make better decisions than the version of you from 2 years ago. Here's something that surprises almost everyone when I bring it up. The most valuable thing $10,000 in savings might do for you has nothing to do with investing at all. It changes your job. When you have zero savings, you are negotiating your entire career from a position of quiet desperation. Your employer doesn't know that, your colleagues don't know that, but your nervous system knows it, and it shows up in ways you can't fully control. You don't ask for the raise because what if things get uncomfortable? What if they say no and it changes how they see you? What if, worst case, you lose the job? You can't afford that risk, so you stay quiet another year. You say yes to the extra project, the weekend request, the unreasonable deadline, the scope creep that was never in your description, because the alternative feels like it could unravel something you can't afford to unravel. You stay in a role you've outgrown for 2 extra years, not because you can't do better, but because leaving feels like stepping up a ledge with nothing below you. $10,000 is what goes below you. Economists call this your BATNA, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. In plain language, it's the answer to the question, what do I do if this falls apart? When your BATNA is zero, you accept whatever is offered, because zero means no options. When your BATNA is $10,000, 3 to 6 months of expenses for most people globally, everything shifts. You walk into the salary negotiation differently. Not aggressively, not with an ultimatum, just calmly. Because the worst case scenario is now survivable. You could leave. You'd be fine. Not forever, but long enough to find something better. And that calm, that almost invisible sense of security, changes how you carry yourself. Research on labor negotiation consistently shows that employees with financial reserves receive higher salary offers on average, not because they demand loudly, but because they project security. And security in a negotiation room is magnetic. Here's the number that should motivate you. If $10,000 in savings helps you negotiate just $3,000 annual raise, which is conservative, well within what research shows is possible, that's $3,000 more per year every year for the rest of your career. Over 20 years, with normal salary growth compounding on top of it, that one negotiation, made possible by a $10,000 buffer, could be worth $80,000 to $100,000 in lifetime earnings. $10,000 doesn't just sit in your account, it quietly reprices your entire professional value. Now here's the part I promised you at the beginning, the part that feels almost unfair once you see it laid out. How long does it take to save the first $10,000? Let's work with a real number. Say you're saving $500 a month, a disciplined, consistent $500 every single month, no exceptions. At that pace, $10,000 takes 20 months. A year and 8 months of showing up, saying no to things, staying the course when it feels pointless, and watching a number grow slowly in an account you're trying not to touch. Hard. Genuinely hard. Most people quit somewhere in those 20 months. The data shows most people quit around month 7. But you didn't. You hit $10,000. Now, how long does the second $10,000 take? With your first $10,000 invested and earning returns alongside your continued $500 monthly savings, the second $10,000 arrives in roughly 18 months. 2 months faster. Same effort, same discipline, just the math starting to lean in your direction. The third $10,000? About 17 months. The fourth? 16. By the time you're working toward your 8th or 9th milestone, your invested money is generating enough in returns that each new $10,000 costs you less time than the last. The finish lines keep getting closer together while you maintain the same pace. And here is where the math becomes almost comic. Once you have $400,000 invested, earning 10% annually, your portfolio generates $40,000 a year in pure returns. That's $10,000 every single quarter, automatically, without a single extra dollar saved from your paycheck. The first $10,000 took you 20 months of sacrifice. The next one arrives every 90 days, on its own, while you sleep. This is what people mean when they say the rich get richer. It's not a conspiracy. It's not an unfair system, though there are plenty of those too. It's just what happens when you stay patient long enough for the math to flip from working against you to working for you. The gap between those two states is $10,000. Now, here's the part most finance channels skip entirely because it's uncomfortable. The biggest threat to your $10,000 is not the stock market. It's not inflation. It's not a bad investment decision. It's you, the moment after you hit the milestone. I see this constantly. Someone saves $10,000 for the first time in their life. They feel the psychological shift we talked about, the relief, the confidence, the sense of, I finally did it. And then, because that feeling is powerful and they've been denying themselves things for 20 months, they decide they deserve a reward. New car, big vacation, lifestyle upgrade, something to mark the occasion. And just like that, the $10,000 is gone. And they have to start the 20-month clock again, from zero. Except now they know what $10,000 feels like, and they have to watch that feeling disappear in a single weekend. Here's what you need to understand about that $10,000. It is not a reward for good behavior. It is not a finish line. It is not money you saved up so you could eventually spend it on something nice. It is the seed. It is the foundation. It is the first domino in a chain that, if you leave it alone, will keep falling for the next 40 years and produce something unrecognizable from what you started with. Spending it isn't just spending $10,000. It's spending $452,000 because that's what $10,000 becomes in 40 years if you leave it alone. The version of you that understands this doesn't feel deprived by leaving it untouched. They feel like they're protecting something, something that's quietly growing, something that's slowly working on their behalf even when they're not thinking about it. Protect the seed. So, let me answer the title directly and completely. Here is exactly what changes after you save your first $10,000. You stop making decisions from fear. You start making them from choice. You stop saying yes to things you hate because you can't afford to say no. You stop flinching every time your phone rings and you don't recognize the number. You stop lying awake at 2 a.m. doing math about money you don't have yet. You stop turning the radio up when your car makes a noise. You start applying for jobs you actually want, not just jobs you're certain you'll get. You start negotiating, calmly, confidently, because the worst case is survivable. You start thinking in years instead of just months. You start seeing price tags differently, not obsessively, just clearly. You start noticing that the $10,000 is growing, slowly at first, then faster than that. And somewhere around month 6 of watching it grow, quietly, on its own, while you go about your life, you stop thinking about money as something you earn and start thinking about it as something you build. That shift in perspective is worth more than the $10,000 itself. None of this requires a trust fund. None of it requires a 6-figure salary. None of it requires being born in the right country or the right family or the right moment in history. It requires $10,000, time, and the discipline to leave it alone once you have it. Remember those two people at the beginning? Same job, same salary, completely different mornings. The difference between them isn't talent, isn't connections, isn't intelligence or luck or timing. It's that one of them has $10,000 sitting somewhere quiet, doing its job, earning its return, building its future while they go about their day without checking the app. And that $10,000 didn't just change their bank account, it changed their brain, their career, their options, their choices, their future. The version of you that has $10,000 saved thinks differently than the version that doesn't, makes different decisions, projects different energy, builds different outcomes. And the only way to become that version is to start right now, with whatever number you have, and let time do what it does. Drop a like if this gave you a different way to think about that first milestone. I'll see you in the next one.